Welcome to the Wise Fiduciary Podcast. I'm Marta Hurst. If you're a plan sponsor, committee member, advisor, or executive responsible for a retirement plan, this show is for you. Season 5, we're doing something a little different. This season is about the fiduciary red line, the moment where it feels like you're doing the right thing, but you're not. It's where industry standard stops being safe and where a routine decision quietly becomes exposure. Each episode will take one decision point and examine it closely, not from a sales perspective or a marketing perspective, but from a fiduciary one. Because most plan failures don't begin with bad intentions, they begin with comfort. Let's define the red line. Today I want to talk about fee compression. At what point is fee compression a red flag?
That should have been a red flag, okay?
Everyone wants lower fees, but at what point does cheap become dangerous? Some providers even offer ultra-low pricing. So what's the catch? I want to break down what reasonable fees look like, when low becomes a red flag, and what are some real-world examples of cutting corner service models that you need to be aware of. So I feel like following the fee disclosure requirements, that's kind of where we started this race to the bottom. Everybody was cutting fees.
Snip, snap, snip, snap, snip, snap.
In an effort to win business or keep business, not just on the investment side, but also record keepers, administrators, even advisors. Lots of plans are won and lost based on who has the lowest fees. We've all seen spreadsheets comparing costs of service providers. I wish there was a better spreadsheet of what services are provided for those fees. Certainly something to consider as you are looking at those spreadsheets in the future. But service providers still have to make money to stay in business. So what do you need to know as you evaluate plan options? Here's the red line. The lowest price for retirement plans can mean subsidized, conflicted, or limited services. So let's dig into that a little bit. Let's talk about hidden fees. Often when you are looking at service provider fees, there can be some, maybe I shouldn't say often, but we see it a lot. There are maybe a record keeper is charging a particular fee, but then when you look at the investments that are being charged, there may be a revenue sharing component in there that is going to them as well. So while you think you are evaluating a record keeping fee compared to another record keeper fee, there might be some underlying fees that are being shuffled around that doesn't really allow you to make an apples to apples comparison. For example, if we have a client, which we have, that gets charged 10 basis points for record keeping costs, but their fund lineup also includes co-manufactured target date funds. These have become very common, I feel like, in the last few years. Often in those co-manufactured target dates, part of the money market portion is made up of whatever fixed contract is provided by the record keeper. So let's say, and in this case it did, that particular target date series fell out of favor. The advisor went to the record keeper and said, hey, I need to make this change to the target dates. And the record keeper said, okay, no problem, but your fee is going to go up an additional 6 or 7 basis points.
What?
So obviously there was some revenue sharing behind the scenes based on that target date series, that co-manufactured option that was presented. So do you really understand all of the fees? And do you know who is being paid what? So let's also talk about service provider extras and potential conflicts of interest. We see a lot of plans that have required proprietary funds. Maybe the target dates I mentioned, sometimes they want you to offer their managed account services. Maybe they have a fixed account that they require be part of it, especially using managed accounts or those co-manufactured funds as the QDIA, because obviously more money goes into those. I've got another example for you because we love those. We had a proposal that showed 7 basis points to a record keeper, but it requires the QDIA to be the managed account solution, which is 35 basis points. And while the argument is participants can opt out, we know realistically that doesn't really happen. The provider knows this doesn't happen, which is why they are willing to charge a lower fee if you are willing to use their options as the QDIA. Let's also talk about reduced services. When fees go too low, something has to give, and it's usually service. I feel like I've kind of picked on record keepers for the first two examples. So let's look at this from the TPA lens. As fees compress, how are TPAs potentially changing their service model to address that they're not getting as much in revenue? We see a breakdown or a lack of an internal review process. A lot of the good quality TPA firms that we work with, they complete a 5,500. They send it to someone else, typically senior in the office, to give that a once over, somebody who knows what they're doing with it before it goes to the client for signature. When you don't have resources or you are cutting costs, that's often one of the steps that gets omitted. We also see potential delays in 5,500 completion. We also see this new trend of self-testing. So in a traditional environment, rather than sending your census to the TPA, who then runs it through their software, we see a lot of providers that now have a spot for the employer to upload and then push a button that then provides you with the results. I have a lot of concerns with that. Sometimes there are exclusions in the plan document. For example, maybe there's excluded classes, maybe there's excluded compensation, otherwise excludable employees for some testing purposes. And as an employer, I barely know about them. Most employers don't know and are not interpreting the plan document to determine what all could be excluded, should be excluded. And it puts a lot of liability back on the plan sponsor, but it feels like a great service. Oh, I can just do this myself. I don't have to wait for somebody. I don't have to send my census and then wait 2 weeks for somebody to tell me if I passed or if I failed. I just uploaded it and hit the button. No, that is actually a drastic departure of service. It's the do-it-yourself model.
A DIY element does add a certain personal touch.
I'm not a fan of at all. For fiduciary purposes, certainly from a liability standpoint, data accuracy, all of those things. TPAs are, that's what they do. That's what they know how to do. They know all the rules. There are dozens and dozens of, when I started, we literally had a bookshelf with all of the rules and how you did what. So to assume an employer who is running their business knows all of the ins and outs of that and can do it themselves is very scary to me. Another area we see services decline or a change in the service model is around participant education. So I remember years ago working with a service provider that offered to send somebody from the record keeper to provide participant education meetings on site. Any size, anywhere, just tell us and here we come. We don't see that anymore. There's potentially some online meeting support. We see more of that world, less of the, hey, we're going to buy everybody lunch and come into your office. I don't know that they needed to be buying lunch and literally come into the office. Our world has also changed a lot in the way that we receive information. But part of that is also a cost-conscious decision. If you can have somebody do 3 meetings virtually during a day rather than paying for travel somewhere and then they conduct a meeting and then they travel back, that certainly helps efficiency and profitability. So how can you protect yourself? It's important to request an all-in analysis. So this is being sure to include, of course, the investment expense and then any extras like money management. Sometimes there's additional fees for self-directed brokerage, anything that you're paying for within the plan. And I realize that some employers, maybe you pay some of those expenses for your plan. Maybe it's all deducted from plan assets. It's important to include all of those so that you can determine who's being paid what, so that you can ensure that those fees are reasonable. Again, does not have to be the least expensive. And there are certainly some concerns with it being least expensive. You're potentially losing services. Those are things to keep in mind as you look at that. I did mention that I wanted to cover how to determine if fees are reasonable. There are a number of benchmarking services that allow you to compare the cost of your plan to other plans. But in order to get the valuable information from that process, you have to understand the fees that are being paid to your plan as it stands. Be sure to ask for details on the services that are being provided. I wish you could say, what are you leaving out of this?
What are you not telling me?
What things did I potentially think you were doing that you weren't? But I think that if you evaluate, I think just having open conversations. Hey, are you doing these things? Hey, you used to come and do education sometimes. We haven't seen you in a while. What's changing? What are the new rules? What support are you being provided? Unfortunately, they're not going to wave the flag and say, hey, here's the things that we're not going to do for you anymore. So you have to be a little bit of an investigator to figure out if anything has changed from an existing service provider standpoint. I think that's important as you are shopping for plans as well. Again, we see a lot of spreadsheeting to look at fees. Here's the fees. Here's the cheapest fee. Pick this one because they've got the best price. Best price does not always mean the best experience for your participants, for your admin team that is having to get on the website and process information, who might need to call for support and that kind of thing. It's important that you understand the services that you're getting for those fees, not just the dollar amount. Ask if the provider uses or requires proprietary products. I feel like this is a bit of a tricky one because many service providers say that you don't have to use their proprietary products. But if you ask for pricing, assuming no proprietary products, then the pricing looks different. So yeah, you don't have to, but if you do, it's a pricing benefit. So I caution that you be careful in how that question gets answered, because I have seen proposals that include proprietary information and then or requirements, like using their fixed account, for example, using managed accounts as a QDIA. And then when we say, oh, do we have to use these? They say no. And then when the plan sells and we go to get paperwork, we say, okay, well, here's what we want to do instead. And they're like, oh, well, the pricing's going to change. So that's kind of a two-part question. Do I have to use them? And if I don't, how does that impact pricing? Ask who performs testing and annual administration. Theoretically, you should know the answer to this question. Do you have a TPA? Is it part of a bundled service? But then also ask what kinds of checks and balances are in place. Are they doing any kind of internal review? Is there anybody else that looks at it? Here, I've got a great example for you. Again, we had a bundled plan a couple of years ago. It moved to one provider from another. And when the provider was completing the annual compliance, they sent the reports back to the employer and said, hey, your deposits don't match. Good luck with that.
Good luck with that.
Fiduciary Wise was on the plan. And so the client reached out to us and is like, well, what does this mean? Like, this isn't making any sense at all. Some of these amounts are like half of what we expected them to be. This can't be right. Where did they get this information? Again, some service providers are very minimal on what help they will provide. This one provided nothing. And so I went back and I requested the transfer reports from the prior provider. And what we determined was that the new record keeper / TPA, because it was bundled, didn't account for the deposits that were made to the prior record keeper before the transfer. That's just a level of, was bundled less expensive than using a TPA? Yes. Does it require that employer now do more, pay more attention? Also, yes. Neither answer is right or wrong, but you just need to know what you are getting. Here's a good one. Ask how fees change if the plan grows or shrinks. A lot of providers do kind of a look back after, if you move to them, then they do a look back and say, oh, hey, we thought you were going to have this much. You don't, is usually the way it goes. They very rarely come back and say, oh gosh, your plan doubled in size. Let's give you a big discount. So you do have to kind of be mindful. I would say if you've been with the same service providers for a long time, this is an excellent conversation to have. Some of them are much better about being proactive and saying, hey, you've hit a break point and we need to reduce your fee. Isn't that a great phone call or email to get? But you need to know, and maybe the business changes over time. We had a plan that was a large, high participation plan. They sold off one of their divisions, and now that plan is going to be about a third of the size that it was. Nothing wrong with that. We're keeping it going, doing all the things, but now all of the service providers are going to have adjustments to their fees. Sometimes that can be good, right? So if you've got like a per participant fee, now you got fewer participants. But if the assets are down and the record keeper has a certain amount of revenue they're going to need to make, then it could go up. So just knowing what to expect from your service providers as your plan changes, how often they're going to look at that, if they're going to be proactive, or if you're going to be the one that has to say, excuse me, we've had some great plan growth and we want a discount. Your job as the employer or the committee member is not to find the cheapest plan. It's to do what's in the best interest of your plan participants. I would like to issue some homework. I don't know how our viewing audience feels about homework, but I really encourage you, if you're a plan fiduciary, this is something that you need to do anyway. But if you're new to the role or if you haven't done it in a while, I encourage you to review your current plan setup and make sure you understand your plan fees. And this is more the homeworky part. Find at least one question to ask your service providers about the fees. I think it's very easy to find questions to ask when you look at fee disclosures and start determining what money is going where within the plan. If today's episode raised questions about your plan, that's the point. Fiduciary responsibility is not about checking boxes. It's about understanding where the red line actually is. If you want to continue the conversation, follow us on social media for ongoing insights and commentary. And if you need clarity around your own plan decisions, we hope that you will schedule time with our team at fiduciarywise.com/scheduling. Until next time, stay thoughtful, stay disciplined, and know where your red line is.